What's up, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here with a Cheesehead TV draft, very, very special, with Pro Football Focus's own Mike Renner. Mike, thanks so much for joining me, man.
Happy to come back on, Aaron, anytime, man.
There's a lot of news breaking this afternoon regarding the 17-game schedule and who the Packers are going to be facing the Chiefs. I just want everyone in the comments to know I will be doing a separate stream about that, but this is going to be strictly draft stuff because, look, the Packers have done precious little by way of bringing in new talent this offseason, Mike. Do you think this was the plan all along? Is this a reaction to the salary cap going down? How do you see the Packers attacking this draft in light of the fact that they have literally signed nobody from outside the building back other than a long snapper?
Well, I would think that this draft, they would try to address more pressing needs than they did a season ago with how close they were
Right.
as a roster. And realistically, I mean, they've always been a draft and develop team. The 2 years ago when they did sign, Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, that was an outlier over the course of just this management's history in the Packers organization. So I didn't expect them to be major players. I expected maybe a little bit of a minor player in terms of trying to plug some holes, because there are a few different places on the roster that they could address. And you can't just do that all via the draft. So I am a little surprised, but I'm not terribly surprised. I do, though, think that this year's draft, like I said, they might go address some positions that are the more glaring weaknesses this offseason.
Well, Lewis starts us off with a really good question in the comments here. What position do you think is the best value at 29? Sitting here right now, obviously we don't know how things will play out, but sitting at 29, regardless of need for the Packers, where do you see the best value being positionally for the Packers when they're on the clock at 29?
I think it's going to be offensive tackle. And I know Packers fans won't love that as a pick. It's not going to be
some
the
will.
sexiest
I
pick.
think some will. Some will be upset, no doubt about it.
But this is a pretty special offensive tackle class. Last year's was special in terms of top end talent. This year, there's 8 guys in PFF's top 40 that are offensive tackles, and legitimate day one type starter offensive tackles, to where that doesn't happen. Usually you're sitting at pick 29, and even last year, towards the back end of the first round, there were guys like Austin Jackson, Isaiah Wilson, I think was pick 29 last year. The guy who's going to be pick 29 at offensive tackle is going to be a much, much better prospect than Isaiah Wilson this upcoming year. So it was a deep tackle class, and there's a lot of guys that kind of fit the Packers mold of athletic tackles. Guys like Dylan Raids, North Dakota State, Walker Little, Stanford, Sam Cosmi, Texas. Like, there are a lot of guys that I think the Packers and the way they've scouted the position over the course of, like I said, the last 10, 15 years would covet highly. So that, to me, looks like probably the most likely fit at 29 right now.
Well, after I asked you on, our own Maggie Loney put up a piece at cheeseheadtv.com looking at 5 players she thinks fit really well with the Packers. And I'd love to get your thoughts on a few of them, just because they're guys that, me, I love the Packers and I'm obsessed with the team, but I am not a draft guy. So I have not heard of most of these guys. So I'd love to get your take on a couple of these to kind of couple up with what Maggie has put here. Starting with Paulson Adebo. I'm not quite sure of the pronunciation, but the corner from Stanford. How does he fit for the Packers, do you think?
I've been saying Adebo. I'm actually not sure on it either. So your guess is as good as mine.
All right. Very good.
So
we'll find out.
He's ridiculously good ball production. I think he has 24 pass breakups over the last 2 years. Well, the last 2 years being 2018, 2019, opted out this past year. Gives you a little bit of a different guy. He's taller, longer, very good ball skills, 8 picks in 2 years over there at Stanford. He's what I call like a silo type of corner, though, in that he is up and down, straight line, zone type of corner, where if you're going to guard the full route tree, that's not going to be him. I kind of think he's maybe a little bit redundant to a Josh Jackson in his skill set. That's a very similar type of player coming out, and Josh Jackson was not going to be the guy that they don't trust him to cover the slot. They don't really trust him to cover a full route tree there on the outside. It's kind of why he doesn't play. So I think in the new scheme, those two guys would be better fits. What they're bringing over from the Rams, that's more what they ask him to do, is play a lot of off and then use those ball skills, use that ability to read. And I think he does that at a really high level. So I do think Adebo would be a fit, 4th, 5th round if he's still on the board.
What about, we saw the news this afternoon, the Packers are bringing back Tyler Lancaster. Obviously, that is not a solution for anything. A fine rotational player. But as far as getting some new blood along that defensive line, what do you think of Darius Stills out of West Virginia? How would he fit?
Yeah, I think Stills he's a later round guy, West Virginia. an athletic, undersized 3 technique, which I think that'll be utilized.
Mike Daniels 2.0?
Yeah.
Another Mike Daniels?
Mike Daniels,
Do I hear that?
similar mold of guy. I think Daniels was
Right.
a much more explosive athlete, though. I think that's Darius Stills is kind of, if you're undersized to play in the interior in the NFL, you better have length, or if you don't have length, you better be really explosive. And I just don't quite see that from Stills. That's why I don't think he'll be necessarily coveted that highly, and why he wasn't, like, his senior wasn't a Senior Bowl invite this past year. So I think he's, like I said, I'm not exactly sure what they're going to be looking for prototype wise along the defensive line,
Right.
what they're going to be scouting. Like, I think they may be away from the, the more true 3-4 defensive ends that they had in the past they were looking at, and maybe moving towards some more undersized 3 techniques. But I still don't, I think there may be better options than him out there in the draft class.
We have Herbert in the comment section just waiting to stir the pot here. I love these type of questions. Where would Jordan Love rank in this year's draft?
Ooh, I like that question.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
I think he'd be right around the Kyle Trask range of quarterback 6 in this draft class for us. You got the top 5 that they might go 1 through 8. Like that, those guys might all be done by 8
Right.
in this draft class. It's looking kind of ridiculous. And then there's probably not going to be another quarterback drafted for 50 picks, I'd say. And then you got the range of Kyle Trask, Jamie Newman, Davis Mills, who I think are going to come off the board somewhere in that day 2 range. That's where I would see Jordan Love in this draft class. He's a pure tools projection that, like, I think we saw it right out the gate. Like, that's why he wasn't even the backup quarterback. He has a long ways to go in a number of different regards. And that's a guy that, if you're not going to maximize the rookie deal, if that guy's going to take 3 or 4 years to develop, that's kind of the window in the NFL that everyone's looking for nowadays.
What do you think as far as the top of this draft class, getting away from the Packers for a second? We've heard a lot of hype around Zach Wilson lately. I really like him as a prospect. I understand that the consensus is around Trevor Lawrence going first overall. Where do you fall? Because I know it's really going to depend on who you talk to as far as how it shakes out after Lawrence. But how do you see, say, the top 3 in your estimation as far as the draftable quarterbacks in this class?
Yeah, I think Lawrence is clearly number 1 for me in terms of the certainty. Like, you're getting a top probably 12 to 15 quarterback probably from day 1, just with the way he played the game of football at the college level. And I think he may not be the best in 4 years. We may be looking back and saying, oh, Zach Wilson was the best, Justin Fields was the best, Trey Lance was the best. But I don't think we're going to be looking back and saying Trevor Lawrence was a bust. I don't even see how that's possible with how just good and consistent he was and the things he's doing translating to the NFL. So Trevor Lawrence is 1 because of that. And I do have Zach Wilson too. BYU could be like his special throws and his ability to make them seemingly from anywhere on the football field, any body position, is different from Trevor Lawrence, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, pretty much any prospect in recent memory. It is, there's a reason why it's Patrick Mahomes-esque. He's the closest thing to that to come out in recent years. Now, he's not Patrick Mahomes, not saying that, but that ability is why people are buying in to him. And then 3, Justin Fields is 3rd on our board. Like, if Wilson and Lawrence didn't exist, I would draft Justin Fields number 1 overall. I think he's that talented.
Really? Would you really?
And a 4.4 40. Like, the guy, I think his rushing ability is undersold. He can hit home runs with his legs and is a threat in that regard. Really accurate. There's some things that aren't great on tape for sure. He's going to have to play faster in the NFL. But when you're that athletic and that accurate with football, I just think he has a really high floor if you build the offense around him and those tools. So I think those are 1, 2, 3 on my board.
Getting back to the Packers, when you look at the fact that they are sitting there at 29, and a couple of people have brought this up, what do you think the possibility is that they trade down, especially in a year where there is so much uncertainty as far as you haven't had a full season to go off of as far as the tape, the most recent tape. Mm-hmm. There's no combine. There's a ton of pro days, but you're kind of at the mercy of each school in that regard. Do you think this is a year where Gutekunst could finally trade down rather than trade up, which he's done every single first round so far when he's been in charge of the draft? Or is that 5th-year option just too valuable to let go of unless someone is really blowing your socks off?
I don't think the 5th-year option with the new CBA is all that valuable with the way it like if guys make multiple Pro Bowls on the 5th-year option, they immediately get paid a bunch now.
But there's an accelerator,
so
right?
Yeah, so it's not like it's not the bargain it was necessarily in the past. So I do think that this could be your trade down. This is your I would like to trade down. Now, it takes two to tango. You have to have someone who wants to trade up to trade down. But especially with kind of the holes they have along the offensive line, it being such a deep offensive line class, you could get multiple starters on day 2, I think, in this offensive line class, guys who can come in right away. And then kind of spray and pray in the secondary at cornerback or linebacker and just try to plug them any way possible. So I do think this is the class. And like you said, the uncertainty, I think from like 20 to 50 on the PFF board, it's really also close. There's not a lot of guys that really stand out after the top 12 to 15 guys. So, yeah.
Right. That makes sense. We got some super chats here I want to get to. Joseph, thank you for the support. Nice editorialization of your title here at the beginning of Joseph's super chat. But thoughts on Samuel Cosmi? When would you draft him value-wise?
I think right around when the Packers are on the board is when I feel comfortable with Cosmi. Now, he really in the Big 12 didn't face a lot of top talent. And when he did, kind of back in Kamal Martin against LSU last year, Kamal Martin got the better of him, really ate him up. And I think that's why he didn't declare that year, even though he could have. Came back this past year. He's a little high cut, like he gets exposed against power sometimes, but I do think the athleticism, his pro day was out of this world for an offensive tackle. He'll get there in time. He might not be, like some of the first rounders we saw, like Tristan Wirfs, Kai Becton out the gate. I don't foresee that being the case with him. He has issues, but man, guys that are that big, that strong, can move the way he does, like that's a really high floor. And I know we said that about Jason Spriggs, sadly, but I think he's a much better prospect.
You had to go there, didn't you, man? You were doing so fine. Then you had to bring it down. Devin, thank you for the super chat. I'm super excited to run it back this year. I hope we trade up and get another quarterback for depth. Can't have enough QBs, in my opinion. Hey, maybe on day 3, they could trade up for a quarterback. Ultimate depth, if you will.
If Trevor Lawrence slips, by all means, go get him.
Exactly. Oh my goodness, man! No one needs this. No one needs this. What are your thoughts on the cornerback position in this year's draft? This is Zach asking. Also, would you expect to have King be the cornerback too, and have potentially a drafted cornerback to develop behind Jair and King?
Yeah, I think they'll draft a cornerback. I think it's actually a fairly deep cornerback class, and there's a number of guys that really fit. I think would fit in their new defense. Guys like Asante Samuel, who other teams may not covet because of other factors. I think Asante Samuel Jr. from Florida State would be an excellent fit.
I love him. Do you think there's a chance he's there at 29?
I do. And I wonder if they will kind of lax. I know they've had height, length,
they took Jair.
They took Jair.
He falls just below it.
And then the Rams defense last year, Darius Williams, 5'8". That guy 5'8", playing on the outside every single down. I think Asante Samuel Jr. is a very similar type of player to a Darius Williams. So I would love for him to be the pick at 29. I think that guy's an impact player.
I had this question in the chat the other day, and my initial response was to kind of dismiss it. But the more I think about it, and sometimes, dear watchers and listeners, yes, sometimes these things haunt me. Do you think a team would give pause to the idea of pairing two guys who are below their typical height threshold, in the sense of putting Jair, who's already a diminutive guy, across from Asante Samuel Jr.? So now you've got two perimeters who are, to put it, bluntly, are pretty kind of undersized, especially the way the league has gone as of late. Do you think, as a evaluator, do you worry about that at all? Or is it just, hey, these guys can play, the tape is good, I don't care?
I don't think you should, because that's one thing that's so difficult to rely on. Basically, you're relying on, if you're an offense, trying to take advantage of that. You're relying on them just contested catches. Like, that's not something that I foresee being that massive an issue. And maybe it'll show up more in the red zone, but like, is Jair Alexander a liability in the red zone? Do teams throw fades on him? It's like, no. So I really wouldn't even give credence to that, especially when one of them is Jair Alexander. If they're not, if they're both kind of undersized guys who get taken advantage of regularly, then we might have to go back to the drawing board.
It makes sense. Kyle asks, thank you for the super chat. Would Javon Holland be a realistic second pick? I imagine, in the second round.
I think he's more of a slot. Like, they could use that in their defense. I know Shannon Sullivan, not exceptional in the slot by any means. I don't know how they are going to be playing with their safeties in the new defense, in terms of, they obviously played a ton of dime previously and used the dime safety. That would be a role for Javon Holland in the NFL that he could succeed in. I don't know if they're going to be doing that this upcoming year nearly as much. Obviously have 2 starting safeties that are very, very good that you're not looking to necessarily replace that. So I think there are other more pressing needs, but I do think Javon Holland is a very talented player that if you're getting him at the back end of the second round, the value would be good.
Zachary asks, is Lucas Patrick really the answer at center? Which I will expound upon with a draft question in the sense of, I do think that's exactly what they'll plan to do as far as sliding Patrick in, kicking Jenkins out to left tackle until Bakhtiari is ready to come back from that injury. But let me ask you this. What was your evaluation, if you can remember, on Jake Hansen coming out of Oregon last year? Because I know they drafted him day 3, was a center, didn't really blow our socks off during camp last year, although that was very limited, only 2 weeks worth of work that we got to see. And then basically we haven't seen him all year long. What was your take on Hansen coming out of Oregon last year?
Yeah, I was not necessarily a fan of Hansen. I think I had a UDFA grade on him coming out. Right. He was just not a powerful center. And then, you can get by. You don't have to necessarily be the most powerful, strong center to get by in the NFL, especially if you're, a zone heavy schemer on the move a lot. But he also wasn't particularly fleet of foot. He was a very technically gifted center. That is how he won at the collegiate level, but was not you're going to have to go up against big boys. Michael Pierce ain't no slouch there over there in Minnesota. You're going to have to be blocking. Akeem Hicks.
Yeah.
Those are powerful dudes. And I just foresaw him struggling with that, especially when you compare him to someone like Corey Lindsley, he had that part of the game down pat.
That makes a lot of sense. Joe asks, would you take Leatherwood at 29?
That's a little high for me. I know a lot of people are talking about
him. Rich for your blood?
A little rich. Yeah, he's just I think he's going to get exposed early on in his career in pass protection, especially if you're asking him to flip sides. He did not maintain positioning well in his pass sets. He looked a lot better, not better, but his issues were getting on guys in space. And yes, he has super long arms, and that obviously helps with offensive tackle, but it was consistent. Anytime he faced a speed rusher, he just got killed. So that's not something that gets alleviated by flipping to right tackle. That's kind of where a lot of the speed rushers operate in the NFL, is against the right tackles. Yeah, so
they've all flipped away from the left tackle, and they've all come on a feast on the right tackle.
Yeah, so
Corey,
interior guy.
Thank you, Corey, for the super chat. 1 O-line, 1 wide receiver, then all defense, right?
I would love that. I mean, as a Backus fan myself, that's where I would love to go if you can take advantage of. Like I said, I actually would love the tackle pick at 29 because I do think it's that deep tackle class. It saves you a lot of money in free agency when you're paying one of your tackles $23 million. If you can not pay the other one and still get quality production out of it, that's tackle is a very expensive position in the NFL. If you do that and then get a guy in the second round, which again I think is a deep wide receiver class, someone like Diami Brown's on the board, someone who can actually get off the line of scrimmage a little better than Allen Lazard, face that press coverage that you're going to be facing against the Bucs in the playoffs. I would be a big fan of that. And then, I do think the value on defense is not going to be first round. There's not a ton of talented defenders or kind of plug and play defenders in this draft class. It's much more offense heavy than it is defense heavy. So that's why I'd address that later on.
Makes sense. Andrew, thanks for the super chat. Plot twist. The Packers sit at 29, move up on day 2. Could you see it?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think 29, if tackle is there, tackle was the one position where it's that you can get a guy there. So I do think, he's been known, Gutekunst has been known for moving up and down in the first round. That's kind of his MO, targeting certain guys that he really likes. But I think there could be a number of guys, like I said, in this tackle class, the guys I named, Radens, Cosme, Walker Little, that all fit their prototype that maybe they're not just targeting one of those. They'll be fine with anyone.
Walter, thank you for the super chat. What was your evaluation of Martin and Barnes last year? I guess obviously Kamal was coming off an injury and Barnes was pretty unknown, but what did you think of them coming into the season before we saw them hit the field?
Yeah, I liked Kamal Martin in the draft last year. Obviously the injury's a massive issue with him at Minnesota and then why he fell down the draft. But I thought he kind of had an all around athletic skill set. He played the slot role in that Minnesota defense, despite being 240. He was a big dude playing that slot role. Didn't really get to see him much between the tackles, but I know guys and some personnel guys around the league loved that guy. I thought he was a second round pick before obviously the injury. And so I thought when he played on the football field too, I think he's going to be one of their starters. I feel really good about that. Barnes impressed me for a UDFA.
Right.
Still don't think he's necessarily the guy going forward. He's an interesting,
Very much agreed.
maybe like sub-package guy. Like you can get by with Chris Barnes. And obviously we saw the Rams defense, number one defense in the NFL with some of the worst linebackers in the NFL last year. It's not a necessary position in that scheme. But so I think you can get by with him, but it's one where you're looking to upgrade, I'd say.
What was interesting to me, it's talking about Kamal Martin, is the college tape that I watched, because I never watch anything but I don't watch a lot until they become Packers. And then I go all in and I try to look at everything I can. What I saw in his college tape, he was so like see ball, get ball. I mean, that guy was a heat-seeking missile to the football. And that really seemed to be missing last year. And I don't know if that's because he did suffer that injury. Maybe that set him back, the instincts, etc. Saw a lot more kind of false steps. Maybe he's playing a different position. I don't know. But, man, the stuff you saw in college was really kind of, arrive in a bad mood, dislodge the ball from the ball carrier. You saw a lot of that. And that seemed to just kind of be missing in his play for the Packers.
That's not unique, though. If looking across rookie linebackers in the NFL,
right.
Like there are a lot of guys who Patrick Queen's tape at LSU looked a lot different than Patrick Queen's tape at Baltimore this past year. Like there are a lot of guys who looked much different because abbreviated offseason, especially so with Kamal and the injury, like abbreviated offseason, no preseason, none of that to get up to speed. And then NFL game is just a different animal at the linebacker position and what you're asked to read. And the speed of the game compared to what you're doing in college. Like your last year in college, you've mastered your system. You are a veteran. You're coming in and it's all foreign to you year one. So it is rare to see a linebacker hit the ground running.
Kyle's got our last question here. Super chat. Thank you, Kyle. Any draft crush you're hoping for? That's right, people. Mike is a Packers fan, so he is allowed to have a draft crush for the green and gold. Is there anybody you got your eye on that you're hoping lands with the Packers?
Two guys I'll give you. One is Walker Little, offensive tackle from Stanford. He was, after his sophomore year, thought of better than a lot of the guys in last year's tackle class. Thought of better than like Tristan Wirfs. And his tape sophomore year was great in pass protection. He is a high-level athlete, explosive dude. Better than Tristan Wirfs, better than Andrew Thomas. Like he was arguably the top tackle in that draft class. Gets hurt, doesn't play the rest of 2019 after one game, doesn't play 2020. Opting out. It's like we just didn't get to see the next step from him. He could be that guy. He could be a top 5 offensive tackle or top 5 pick in this class. Just we didn't get to see that from him. So I think if physical tools are there, if he's still on the board, would love that pick. And then a wide receiver, I think Elijah Moore from Ole Miss. Just a speed threat in the offense that's a lot more reliable.
You've just guaranteed that the Packers will never select him by mentioning his speed. Like it's just they don't like fast guys. I don't know what it is. I mean, they like the big prototypical 6'1", 6'2" guy who work over the middle. They just don't like the speed.
I was gonna say I haven't mentioned his run blocking. No clue how he run blocks. That might be the death knell. that might be the nail in the coffin for him.
Well, strike him off the Matt LaFleur board anyway. Mike, I can't thank you enough for taking the time, man. Thanks so much. Make sure you check out Mike's stuff at Pro Football Focus, and we'll definitely be talking again before the draft, Mike. Thanks a lot for coming on, man.
Oh, for sure. Thanks for having me here.